Hello. Hi guys. Thanks for coming this talk. My name is Sun Huang. I'm a senior threat researcher at Proofpoint. This talk, when will be presented? I hope you guys enjoy this talk. Thank you.
Okay, guys. Thank you for staying until the very end. I'm sure this is going to be worth your while. My name is Wayne. I work for Proofpoint as the VP of Engineering. This talk, we're going to be talking about, because over the past 2 years, we've published a lot of material on these threat actors that we track every day. We published exactly how they do their daily businesses, what tools they use, what servers they use, who they are, who they target, all of their techniques. And people have always asked us, how do you get such intel, right? It's very detailed information. And so in this talk, we're going to be detailing how we do our research at Proofpoint. Okay, come on. Okay, hold on. Okay, clicker doesn't like me. All right, so and a little bit about our background. I founded a company called Armorize Technologies in 2006. Most of us are in Taipei. We started out by being a web application security company. So if you were in the previous talk, we did a lot. We developed and sold a product that scanned for source code for application vulnerabilities. And we did a lot of pen testing as well. So we started out being a vulnerability company, vulnerability scanning company. And eventually we moved on to malware analysis and threat intelligence. And Proofpoint acquired us. Proofpoint is a public company in the US, in Bay Area. We were acquired in 2013. And as a part of Proofpoint's research now, we've carried our knowledge of vulnerabilities into Proofpoint's team to conduct this type of threat research. So today we're going to show you 25 very useful methods for gathering threat intel, and we'll show you how we use those techniques against 30 real cases. We mostly use these techniques against command and control servers operated by actors. And it's mostly because actors are careless. They don't take care of their security well. They have misconfigurations, and they have vulnerabilities inside their code. Techniques we use mostly are pen testing and code review techniques. And we'll show you how intelligence gathering is key to a intelligence-based security strategy today. Okay, so this is, if you're a Proofpoint user, this is what you will see in your product a lot. We run the world's largest sandbox in the cloud. So we scan for millions and millions of emails every day. And we throw all of the malicious binaries we find into our sandboxes, and our sandbox generate a ton of forensics for our customers. So if you're one of our customer, or if you work at Proofpoint like us, you will be staring at a lot of URLs every day. And these URLs are generated by the sandbox. These are malware-generated traffic. And so our story starts, our daily work starts with these type of URLs. So what can we do once we have a ton of these URLs that are part of traffic generated by malware? Method one, very easy, analytics beacon. A lot of these malware like to use free third-party analytics services to display reports of their infections. And one example is Nerdjax. We picked this example because it made big news being shipped pre-installed in a major notebook brand a few years back. It's a variation of Superfish. And that actor, until today, I checked yesterday, they have hard-coded inside their malware an analytics beacon that just heartbeats out with every new injection. They'll heartbeat out a beacon to a third-party free analytics service. So when you see that URL inside a sandbox, you'll very quickly find out that, oh, they're using extremely tracking service, and then there's no password, it's open access. You log into the panel, you can actually see that they're pretty much targeting Brazil. Brazil is 75% of their infections, and then US and Canada added together, that's 90%, right? So you know how many infections this particular actor can have per day or per month, and you can see where they're targeting just by staring at their analytics dashboard, and it's open access. Method 2, open directories. A lot of these actors leave their directories open, and you can just list out all the files. And here in this example, we're using one of the CryptoWall actors because I guess most of you would have heard of CryptoWall, but you might have not seen how the group operates. Well, this particular group, a lot of their directories are open access, and you can just tweak the URL from the URL that you get from your sandbox, and you can see a list of you can see what they have in their directories. You can download their files. And here, for example, this sent mail. Let's see. Okay, this guy is their spam tool, right? So being an email security company, it's very useful for us to get a hold of the tool that they use to send out all these emails so that we know exactly what characteristics to look for in an email that's generated by them. And then we also found out that other than distributing CryptoWall, they distribute other types of malware. For example, here is an email harvester that they also distribute infect machines, and these harvesters will then pump back the harvested email addresses from infected machines back onto one of their servers. And so when we discovered this, we realized, okay, so they're running campaigns against just a few countries: Canada, France, Spain, UK, and United States, right? That's all they're interested in. And in each directory, we can see the number of victims, who's targeted, who's been infected. And then there's a total stat.txt that showed us how active they are, what the infection rates were. So that's method 2, used against CryptoWall, open directories. Another group that has this vulnerability, Dridex 120. And they're targeting primarily the UK. Again, a list of their directories. Here, let me see if I can zoom this for you. All right, so if you look at their open directory, you'll see basis, which when you open is just a list of their email template that they're going to send out. So even before they launch their campaign, we have our signature ready, right? Because every time before they do it, we're looking at this as they do their jobs, and we're like, okay, they're probably going to launch their campaign tomorrow. So let's react to that. And you can also see the list that they're targeting, and you can see most of the files here, it's either GB or UK, because this group just loves targeting the UK. So that's Dridex 120 with open directories vulnerability. Method 3, fuzzing common file names. You'd be surprised how many command and control panels you can find just by running a simple fuzzer. And here, Nerdjax again, we ran a fuzzer and we found stats.php, which was one of their statistics panels. And from that, we learned a lot. And Undownloader, which targets Brazil. Same thing. We found point.php. Again, that's their command and control panel. And that gave us, the list of all of the infected machines, the IP addresses, the operating systems, and very interestingly, for every single infected machine, they love to list out the antivirus that's installed that didn't catch your infection. So that was fun to look at. With all these actors, so maybe I should have explained this a bit. So when they infect machines with their malware, these malware will connect back to their command and control server. And on that command and control server, there are usually two means that the actors use to maintain and interact with these servers. One is their own custom developed command and control panel or management panel, or the other means that they use is they just put a what we call a web shell. So kind of like a remote PHP file manager that's open source or third party that they just put on their server as a means for their remote management of that server. So here is fuzzing, worked against Undownloader, which is an actor that's targeting primarily Brazilian victims. Again, fuzzing against low-key stealer, which is a variation of Pony. We found Linux.php, which is not their own custom-developed control panel, but a web shell that they love to use to control their machines. And, okay, so here you can see, I don't know if you can see, Zoom doesn't work very well. Let's see. Okay, probably can't see, it's too small, but they're using RC shell. It's a type of web shell. So these are just simple PHP scripts, just one file you put on your server and allows remote management of that server. So once we get access to that web shell, then we basically have almost unrestricted access to their command and control server. Method 4. Some of these actors turn on their Apache server status module. And here is low-key plus, which is low-key password stealer, which is variation of Pony, plus neutrino. We found a while ago that they have combined, that this actor has combined these two malware into one panel. As we'll show you how we figured that out is their Apache server status module was turned on, so we just wrote a script to keep on crawling that module, that URL. We're looking at these URLs, and let me try to zoom again. Hopefully it will work. Okay, here we go. So that is their URL, their file name. It's pretty hard to guess. So we could not have fuzzed this one or have found this one manually, but by looking at their Apache server status module, we're able to find this URL, this file, which then led us to, at that time, pretty new panel. And as you can see, it's the low-key stealer panel, but reports, if you click on reports and you click on plus, it will take you to a neutrino panel. So they've kind of combined these two panels into one panel. And so we got access to this actor's new panel through their Open Apache server status module. one of the actors to crypto wall. I'm sure all of you guys know crypto wall. But you may not know that one of them loved leaving their Apache server status module on and open. So again, very complicated URL, very hard to find, but we saw it, and that again led us to their panel, and from their panel we knew everything about them. And once we know everything about them, we kind of will always forever know everything about them because they just tend to use the same passwords and techniques over and over again. PHP error messages, method 5. Try to, some of them leave their error messages turned on, so try to make their PHP script throw an error exception. This is what you get, and from that it's very useful because you get a list of file names. And like for this one, this is called unknown bot. It's a backdoor. And from here, you can see that we found SDK.php, which then led us to a unprotected command and control panel where we can see each one of their infections. We can send each infected computer a command or see what's been downloaded from that computer. Not password protected, all you needed to do was to figure out that URL, which we did through PHP error messages. Python, Dango debug enabled. So if Dango's debug is enabled, you access an arbitrary URL, and it will actually give you a URL map of the entire Python application. A few years back, we published very detailed research on the Asprox group, which was, upon a time, one of the most active email threat actors out there, infecting a huge number of websites with JavaScript exploits that installed the Asprox malware. And so here on the left, you see, Dango's debug info. It just basically, it'll give you a URL map, and from that, you see here API v2. So from that, we basically reversed out their API. And then from their API, we figured out, oh, so what this group is doing is very interesting. We used to thought that they hacked into all this website. Absolutely not. What they did is they figured out the quicker way to do it is to run a marketplace and buy in volume all of the hacked WordPress and other Joomla type of CMS admin username and passwords. So we found that they ran this underground marketplace, and they have this fixed format, and you submit a big text file with username and password and URL to them. They'll automatically log into every one of these WordPress, calculate out how many entries in that text file is valid, and then pay you accordingly. And they spend a ton of money on it. And we learned all about this first through their Dango debug information. We reversed out their APIs. We got everything out of them. And we published a report. We realized that they owned unique web shells by domain, more than 3 million. Okay? So when they massively buy these WordPress username and admin passwords, they have this script that they will automatically upload a web shell to every single one of these compromised websites, so as for them to log in later to implement and inject their malicious JavaScripts. So 3 million unique by unique domain, and almost 8 million by unique file name. They also bought SMTP accounts, more than 2 million, 500,000 FTP accounts, and so on. So at that time, that's how we did our research, dump out their debug information, reverse out their API, and dump all their numbers out. Okay, summary from methods 1 to 6, starting from URLs that we get out of the sandboxes, analytics beacons, open directories, fuzzing file names, Apache server status, PHP error messages, and Python Dangle debugging enabled. We have 25, so we've got almost 20 to go. Okay, so now that we played around with, now that from their URLs we know where the server is, and we played around with the file structure. But what if we found the control panel, but it needs authentication? What do we do? Method 7, weak passwords. Here is the Black Moo group, Chinese group only targeting Korea, and that's their control panel. What do? We guess the password. For this guy, password is 1 character, 1. Right? So we guessed it, we got in, learned everything about them. That's their panel, all in Chinese. So these panels tell us a lot, right? How they do their operations, what's their infection rate, how big a campaign they're executing, things like that. Again, weak passwords, again, Cerber, Sage. I'm sure all you guys know the Cerber ransomware. But you probably don't know that, that their panel's password is root. So we guess that. And that they're using a web shell, WSO shell. They didn't write this panel themselves, but guys, time to change your passwords. And from their web shell, of course, then we got access to the rest of their infrastructure, which included, more panels. This is their customized panel, which gave us a lot of intel on their operations. Method 8, how else can we get passwords? Hard-coded passwords. The IRC bot, for example, what they do is they infect these machines and they upload the stolen wallets, passwords, screenshots using FTP. And the FTP password, they've hard-coded in, let's see if I can, it's hard to use. Okay. It's settings.txt. So in settings.txt, you will actually find a whole bunch of hard-coded FTP username and passwords. And when we log into their FTP, we saw everything. So we saw that this bot generated HTML files for everything that's stolen. So it's very interesting. It's not plain text, it's just HTML. You click on it, it will render. And then they upload it. They go to that URL, they get the FTP username and password, and they log into their own FTP server, upload everything. So we also logged into their HTTP server and understood their operations that way. So that's method 8, hard-coded passwords. Sometimes when you reverse malware, their malware, you will see a lot of hard-coded passwords that you can also use. Method 9, insufficient authentication. This is an example, for example, the Handsitter downloader that we studied. It's very interesting, and you'd be interested, quite a few of them have this problem. So here, if you don't supply the right username and password, they'll still return you the content, the HTTP response content. They'll just have a 302 redirection. So if you're using a normal browser, you get redirected back to the login page. But if you use a man-in-the-middle proxy such as Burp, you change that 302 to a 200, you're actually logged in, right? So their idea of not authenticating you is just to change the HTTP status code from 200 to 302. That's all they do. So if you change it back, we got access to their control panel. The Android marcher malware, same thing. At first, when we saw this, we didn't know about this group. We tried to access their panel, couldn't get in. Same problem, insufficient authentication. And then after we got into their control panel, we learned everything about them. We learned that they're primarily Android-based, and they man in the middle of your traffic. And when they recognize that the traffic appears to be logins to banks, they will hijack that HTTP or HTTPS session, and they'll steal your passwords, banking passwords. So we got their sample, their malware, all because of this insufficient authentication vulnerability that they had. Okay, so weak passwords, hard-coded password, insufficient authentication. Let's say we've authenticated ourselves. Now, can we expand laterally? One technique that was successful for us was against Keybase. Keybase is a very active Nigerian actor. And what they do is they love to put different panels, all in PHP, in different directories. But they use the same session variable called login for all of these PHP, right? So if you just get one password to one of their panels, you logged into all of their panels. So that's called session fixation, method 10, and we successfully used this against Keybase. And that's their panel, different panels. And you can learn a lot, like Keybase, their malware takes screenshots, and we don't know why, but they always infect themselves. And so there's always a few directories where you can see their own screenshots. And so you just stare at it and you see what they're doing every day, right? And here we capture a screenshot, we stare at this a lot. They're one of the most active BEC actors right now. And by BEC, BEC is very manual, and it's much harder for automated security solutions to detect. So here what they're doing is they've compromised these victims, and they're modifying their invoices, right? So that's very typical BEC. As you can see, I'm a buyer, and the seller is emailing me an invoice. They've intercepted the email. They will then modify that invoice, the wiring instructions, mail it again back to the buyer and say, oh no, we've modified the invoice. Please email it to this new against this new wiring instructions, right? And they do and they are successful, and they make a ton of money, and they're very active, and they don't know we're staring at them. Okay, so methods 7 through 10: weak passwords, hard-coded passwords, insufficient authentication, session fixation, all of which will get us authenticated against your panels. So how do we find more vulnerabilities? Code review. So we're going to be talking about 4 code review techniques. And then the first one is, how do we obtain source code? One way to do it is fuzzing it. A lot of them keep their source code in a file name that's the same as their directory, right? So like bn, then what you do is bn.zip or bn.rar. So you can write a fuzzer, you try, and you will get the passwords. So we have our own fuzzer. And once we get their source code, then we can manually look at the source code or use some tools to find vulnerabilities inside their source code. Okay, here's cross-site scripting, ISR stealer. Okay, so you can see here it's persistent cross-site scripting. They are just generating HTML code by using unsanitized user-supplied data. So we conducted, and so here's the test with burp. It works. So what we did was we did an experiment. We took 170 ISR stealer panels, and we cross-sited them with a cookie stealing script. And we let we ran the experiment for 2 weeks, and we got 103 cookies. So the successful rate was 60%, and with these cookies, we're able to log into their panels. Okay, so this is persistent cross-site scripting against a Nigerian actor that worked very well for us. Method 13, hidden backdoors. Few years back, Zeus started to get popular in the Middle East and in Africa amongst these actors. They didn't buy Zeus. We don't know where they got their Zeus, but their Zeus their Zeus infrastructure was a compromised version. Somebody tweaked it just a little bit to put a backdoor inside their Zeus. And everybody was using this version. And up until today, we don't know who did it. But for their version of Zeus, if we have this get variable set, then on the server side, it's going to eval it. That's all. We don't know who put it in. But once we got their source code, we found out, okay, so somebody implemented this backdoor in all of their Zeus that they're using. And so we just wrote a script to automatically get into their Zeus and get all their data out against a large number of these actors. So this is what we call hidden backdoors. Method 14, remote command execution. Zeus, Citadel, same thing. So you can see here that it's constructing system command by using unsanitized user input. So that allowed us to execute arbitrary commands on any of their servers. And Citadel and Zeus was very active back in the days, so that allowed us to do quite a bit of research against them. SQL injection. Android opfake malware is the example that we're using here. So IMA, so when their malware infects Android devices, the malware will send back to its server the IMA code of that mobile device. And as you can see here, so the IMA code is sent as a get variable, and then they're constructing a SQL command without sanitizing it, right? So what we do is we just reverse out this format, and we SQL inject them. And we got access to the servers. Okay, so methods 11 through 15 all has to do with deeper vulnerabilities. That's easier to find using source code review. You can also find these not having source code. It's just easier to find with source code. Cross-site scripting, backdoors, remote command execution, and SQL injections. All very powerful and very useful. Okay, so having their admin control, having access to their control panel is great, right? You get almost everything already. But what if you just want to root their server? What if there's more information you want from their server? You want to have a look at their server logs, see how they're logging into their servers, right? To further track them down. How do you do that? How do you just own the entire server? Method 16, remote command execution. For example, Voltrack. What people might have realized is Voltrack's tiny loader was downloading the payload, but they put their payload, they host their payload using HFS, which had remote command execution vulnerability. So that's their HFS. And so we're just able to use a known RCE vulnerability against their HFS and execute remote command, put in a backdoor, log ourselves in. Shell shock. Method 17, Sutra TDS. This was undisclosed. We didn't have a lot. Sutra TDS is still today, we think one of the most widely used TDSs by all of these actors, right? And back when, before show shock vulnerability was disclosed, we didn't know much about who made Sutra TDS and who's using them and this and that, right? But when show shock came about, we found that Sutra TDS was vulnerable to show shock because it had a PHP that, I'm sorry, it had a Perl or Python. Perl, okay. Had a Perl script that ran the env command, which made it vulnerable to show shock. And so all of a sudden, for all of these actors that ran Sutra TDS, we got into their server. We learned a lot about them. Okay, so that's show shock, used against any actor that was or still is using Sutra TDS. Method 18, Java unserialized vulnerability. Worked against, for example, Android fake angry. It's a fake Angry Birds malicious Android app. Java unserialized vulnerability, we won't go into details, but that allowed us to gain access to their server. Okay, so now let's say we have access to their command and control panel. We have access to the entire server. How do we very quickly understand what information is useful on those servers and how we spend our time? Because time is limited. They may quickly find out and just take the server down. One technique that we found useful was just look at the Webalizer and AW stats. So that's what we do most of the time when we get access, because from these, they'll show you the most access parts of that web server. And for example, for Norton Gold, which is a Russian actor that we disclosed in detail, right? And when we first gotten access to the machines, we just quickly looked at their HTTP stats, and then we later realized that it helped us a lot because all of their key features of their infrastructure is listed as the top accessed HTTP or top access URLs on their web server. Okay, summary. Rooting the server and quickly overviewing data. Method 16, remote command execution, shell shock, Java unserialized vulnerability, and HTTP stats. Now moving on to more complex techniques. Path traversal or arbitrary file include. Worked against Magic POS, which is a POS malware. So as you can see, okay, there we go. So as you can see, it was vulnerable to arbitrary file inclusion. So that's what we leveraged against them. And we dumped out their PHP, and here you can see their admin username, root, their password, their database username and password, and also their encryption key, all hard-coded inside their PHP. And that got us access to their command and control panel. File upload vulnerability, unrestricted, worked against Yahoo spam bot. So they had this file upload function to upload new malware binaries. You can see their core.exe, that's a binary. So they use this feature to upload new binaries. It has unrestricted file upload feature. So what we're able to do is just manipulate the file name, upload a web shell onto their server, and we got access. satisfy prerequisites. This is more fun. We have about 3 minutes left. So I'm going to try to show you this one. Okay. So let's look at this one. So we got their source code. And from their source code, we saw that when infected malware tries to send screenshots, stolen passwords, wallets back to the server, it checks for user agent, and it checks for a banned IP list. Here you can see that it checks also for content type, and for all of the stolen keys, the recording of the keystrokes, it put in logs. For all of the wallets, it puts those in files. Here is their code that checks the user agent string. So we saw that. So we made sure that our exploit code had the exact same agent string. Otherwise, it will ban the IP. We also saw that in cookies, there must be auth keys, which is their encryption key, hard-coded inside their PHP, so we included that in our exploit as well. Here is if your IP, if they don't like your IP, then they will throw out a fake 404 page. And here you can see if you do something wrong, they'll ban your IP, and they'll also put your referrer and your agent string inside their database. It will give you a not found, which is a customized HTTP 404. Here we go, right? Hard-coded HTTP 404. So when you get this, it's just that they don't like some part of it. You're missing something. Okay, so here's the key part. We want to leverage this upload file function. And here you can see that it has a cookie. It's okay. So it will construct a new file name, and it will copy the uploaded file to the new file name. And the directory that it's copying to has PHP and all these other script engines disabled. So what we want to do is we want to influence the copy command to copy into another directory that doesn't have these restrictions. So we want to manipulate the file name and the directory name. You can see it's concatenating user supplied data into the ultimate file name. And the first one they used is a cookie called IP. And it doesn't check for that cookie. It doesn't sanitize that cookie. So what we do is we make sure that, so this is our POC code. We made sure that we have our agent string set. We have our authentication key set in the cookie. And very importantly, look at our IP. Okay? Let me just pause it. Okay, because it doesn't check the IP, so here we're putting it on, we supply previous directory test. Time is over, but I'm almost done. Okay, so that's our POC code, executed against their code, and it worked. So that's how we got access to their infrastructure. That's arbitrary. So what we do is then we upload a web shell, and then we have access to their entire server. So that worked against us. We eventually got access to everything. Method 23 is C2 communications, kind of the same thing. Okay. 20 to 23, path traversal, file upload, vulnerabilities of different types. Method 24, two last methods. Okay, so now we've owned everything, but sometimes they have an Nginx reverse proxy in front of their server so that although we're accessing their web control panel, we don't know what the actual server domain or IP is, okay? A lot of them do that. So what can we do about it? Like, for example, for Norton Gold, here, one technique, see if I can show you. Okay. No more time. Okay, one technique is set cookie. So in their set cookie HTTP response header, you can actually see what their actual domain is. So Norton Go, they always had Nginx reverse proxies up front, but by looking at that HTTP response header, we're able to know their real domain. How about their real IP? DrideX 120. We don't know what, reverse proxied, we don't know what their IP is, but they have PHP info. And inside their PHP info, we saw their real server IP. Conclusion, 25 proven threat intel gathering techniques, access analytics data that allowed us to access analytics data, access control panel functions, retrieve control panel passwords, gain root access to control panels, lateral expansion, arbitrary file access, and server root access. And these techniques helped us build knowledge of who's behind the campaigns, who's been targeted, actor infrastructure, and tools in use, unreleased malware binaries, actor operations, and strategies. And most of C2 panels contain some type of vulnerabilities. All right, that's our talk. Thank you. Yep.
So when you're going after some of these servers, I know a lot of people are compromised, and so the criminals are actually using a compromised server to do a lot of their. So when you're going into those servers, you're now compromising a victim. So you're now victimizing the guy who's got a compromised server. How do you justify going into servers that are not yours and you don't have permission to be in?
Yeah. So most of these servers are not owned, not compromised servers. So when we're dealing with command and control servers, most of these are their own servers. Sometimes they rent it, but it's mostly not compromised servers. Well, when we work with takedown companies or when we work with hosting companies that own these infrastructure, we try to get them to keep the data before the takedown and work with intelligence agencies for the takedown, but it's very hard. Most of the time, they don't want to spend time to just take it down, and you lose all the intel against these actors. And and also the legitimacy of this, they're now passing a bill. So just to legitimize all of this, yeah. The bill is like if somebody points a gun at you, you can point a gun back. Intelligence collection. Yeah. Questions? Yeah.
It looks really crazy. I mean, it's very basic vulnerabilities. So what's the proportion of bad guys who know how to protect themselves?
What's the
proportion of, I mean, if we just stick to your list of vulnerabilities, it looks like every bad guys just don't know how to protect their servers. So in the reality, how many of them do how to secure server?
They don't spend a lot of time securing their servers. And we used to be just doing open directories, just looking around, and we can already get a lot of information. You just have to spend enough time. And then it's very valuable when you get these type of information as a threat researcher, because for example, their passwords, they just don't change, right? So even if they fix their vulnerabilities, if you already know their passwords, you can use it for a long time. Just keep them tracked for a very long time.
Good.